This is how executions were carried out at Adak, a camp on the Peshawar River. They would take the opposition members with their things out of the camp compound on a prisoner transport at night. And outside the compound stood the small house of the third section. The condemned men were taken into a room one at a time, and there the camp guards sprang on them. Their mouths were stuffed with something soft, and their arms were bound with cords behind their backs. Then they were led out into the courtyard where harnessed carts were waiting. The bound prisoners were piled onto the carts from 5 to 7 at a time and driven off to the Gorka, the camp cemetery. On arrival, they were tipped into big pits that had already been prepared and buried alive. Not out of brutality. No, it had been ascertained that when dragging and lifting them, it was much easier to cope with living people than with corpses. The work went on for many nights at Adak, and this is how the moral political unity of our party was achieved. Now, you see, what seems to be happening there is that the people who are engaged in these activities are classifying those who oppose their political beliefs as contemptible and therefore worthy of destruction. And that seems to be partly a fear response, you know, that which is not us, but it's also, it seems very much also to partly to be tied very deeply into this disgust and contamination system, about which we don't know much about the cognitive elements of that system. Although one of the things that's worth considering, you know, this has gone through my mind, is that, you know, you might ask, why the hell do human beings categorize things? Because other animals don't really do that the same way. We really categorize things like mad. And you think, well, first of all, we're omnivores, right? And that's a kind of a weird problem, because if you're omnivores, you can eat anything except the things you shouldn't eat. You know, and making a clear, and that's a real problem. If you're a koala bear and all you eat is eucalyptus leaves, it's like poof, problem solved, unless the eucalyptus leaves aren't around, and then you die. But if you're an omnivore, you have to run all over the place, and you can eat damn near anything, but you have to keep track of the things that will kill you, and the things that are poison, and the things that are contaminated, and the things that are good for you. And it's not an easy thing to do that. So it seems like part of our classification system, the cognitive elements, seem to actually have emerged out of contamination and disgust concerns, and that seems to be grounded in some sense in what, you know, our ability to make decisions about what we're going to put in our mouths and not. You know, like people don't like to put disgusting things in their mouth, generally speaking. You know, you can overcome that, so people will eat, you know, moldy cheese, but you really have to work to overcome that, and you have to work to overcome your disgust at eating bitter substances. So you have to develop a taste for coffee, and you have to develop a taste for olives, because a lot of things that are bitter are actually poisonous. So the idea that there are things that you can put in your mouth that are good for you, and there are things that you can't put in your mouth because they're bad for you, is rooted somehow very deeply in our ideas of categorization, and also in our ideas of morality, right? And you think of morality as a higher order cognitive function, but think about, you know, modern people are as obsessed with food as the Victorians were obsessed with sex, and people are making divisions, primary divisions of morality based on what each other eat all the time. You know, the vegetarianism movement or the vegan movement is a really good example of that. I mean, those sorts of concerns have been present throughout human history, as far as I can tell, because there's lots of ancient sects that are vegetarian. I mean, there's lots of people in India who are vegetarian primarily, and often for religious beliefs, you know, so it's a matter of, and it also seems that we tend to divide people into groups, even ethnic groups, on the basis of what one group is allowed to eat and what another group will eat. And so, you know, Christians will eat swine, and that's something that, you know, more conservative Jews and Muslims in general won't touch. It's disgusting and it's contaminated, you know, and it isn't fear exactly, it's something other than fear. It's more, and the danger of conceptualizing it in terms of contaminated and disgusting, and you see this a lot in the language that say the Auschwitz camp guards used with regards to the people that they were putting in the ovens, for example. They weren't people, they were rats and insects. That was the language. It's not like people are afraid of rats and insects. You know, I mean, it's a rat. That's not a big problem. But you can easily hate it, and it is something to be destroyed. You know, and so we also don't know to what degree, when you use the disgust system to classify someone, whether you're automatically putting them into the category of disgusting thing that should be destroyed. And there's a woman named Martha Nussbaum who's a legal scholar, and she's a liberal, and she suggested that our legal decisions should never be based on disgust. You know, but then I read Nussbaum and I think, well, yeah, it's easy to say that, except the disgust system is what stops you from eating things that will kill you, and you can't just shut the damn thing off because, you know, it's a fundamental biological mechanism and it orients you in the world. Now, and so we don't know how to control its spillover, say, into radical political belief, but just saying don't do that, or, you know what I mean, it's not wrestling with the problem, because, first of all, you don't want to be not disgusted by things. That's a really bad idea. But by the same token, you know, if you get too radical about that, you get too orderly, then not, you know, if you're anorexic, you can't even stand your own body, that's really not a good thing, you know, because the anorexics I've worked with, they often talk about their fantasies, and they look at their body and what they see is like corruptible flesh, basically, and they have fantasies about purity, and the purity is they want to reduce themselves to bone, you know, because bone is white and it's pure, and it doesn't have this sort of corruptible flesh hanging off it, and, you know, that seems to go along with fairly severe perceptual aberrations. So, because anorexics don't really seem to be able to look at their body as a whole. What they seem to do is focus obsessively on parts, and they can never really get the parts together. So, you know, and I don't exactly know how that's associated with disgust either, except that hyper, you know, that hyper alertness and hyper concentration could easily be associated with analysis of things that might be disgusting and dangerous. Anyways,